Welcome to another tutorial from PH Studios. This is from the XNA Advanced Techniques series. In this tutorial we're going to cover how to move your sprite using the keyboard, using whatever buttons you wish to use, and you want to move the sprite around using those buttons. Then we'll take a look at how to use the gamepad, which is the Xbox 360 controller connected to your Windows computer. I have the wireless controller using the wireless adapter, so I'll cover that, and it'll basically be the same coding for your Xbox. And by the way, there's going to be an Xbox series after the Tower Defense Complete games, so if you're into doing it on the Xbox as well as the computer, or rather do it on the Xbox instead of the computer, you have that to look forward to. Well, let's get started on the keyboard input. First, we need to get the sprite that we want to move. If you go to the main website, phstudios.com, let's get the XNA Complete Games 2 Space Shooter, and let's get the sprites link. So let's download that. Let's extract it. Now I have the sprites here. Now I'll just worry about moving the player around. You can add the enemy and bullet if you want, but for the tutorial I'll just use the player. So I'll start up Visual Studio and create a new project. This is going to be XNA Game Studio 3.0 Windows Game, and let's call it Keyboard Movement. Once that's generated, we can go back to our sprites folder and drag the player into the content portion of our Solution Explorer. Now, just like the previous tutorials and in the basic training series, we need to get that into memory by adding a texture 2D object. And call it texture or player or whatever you want. And now we need a vector 2 to hold the position. Once we have those, the player is inside the solution, but we need to get it inside memory. So just like last time, let's load content by doing texture is equal to content.load. It's a type texture 2D, and the asset name is player. Now that the texture is set and we are loaded the PNG file into the texture object, you want to center that on the game window, and in order to do that we need to do a few operations to the texture itself by using the texture width and the texture height. So we need to set the position is equal to center texture, and let's just pass it the texture. Now this is not a created method. We can see the little box underneath the C, highlight over that, and it'll generate the method stub. Let's delete the throw new exception. And all this does is return a vector 2. So we can just do return new vector 2. Now the X component of this vector is going to be the game window divided by 2, so you get the center of the game window, and then half the texture dot width subtracted from that. So it's a little hard to visualize. So half the game window just gives us the location of the center of the horizontal direction of the width. Then we subtract the texture.width, and this is all divided by 2, so it actually centers the texture. As you heard me talk about, the positioning of a texture without an origin is set to the top left of the sprite itself. So this is why we need to divide by 2 to get the center of that. So to get to the dimensions of the game window, it's graphics device .viewport .width, and we need to divide that by 2 to get the center of the width. Then we need to subtract the texture dot width divided by 2. And that gives us the center of the texture in the horizontal direction. So the X component is now centered. Now we need to do the same for things for the Y. Graphics device dot viewport dot height divided by 2 minus texture dot height divided by 2. So that is the center position that our texture can handle, and that is stored in the position. So we're all good to go. Now let's draw it just to make sure. Sprite batch dot begin, sprite batch dot draw the texture, comma, position, comma, color dot white, and finally sprite batch dot end. And we'll press F5 to see if everything's running fine. If it is, we should have a centered sprite. And right now we cannot move it because we have no coding to allow that. So that is a side tip on how to center it. You need to get the center of the game window by dividing the width and the height divided by 2. And depending on what the origin is on the texture, if you do not have an origin, the positioning is set to the top left. So we need to divide the width by 2 and the height by 2. And that was covered in a basic training series. I discussed the complications you have when you actually add an origin to your object. So be careful on that, and if you don't remember that, you can always go back and check the tutorial out and hear me talk about the origin correctly. So to unload content, let's just, oops, does not play, it's texture this time. Let's just set texture is equal to null. Okay. So now that we have our sprite drawn, let's update it using the keyboard. And a simple way to do this is a keyboard state object. And to get the state, you use the keyboard class dot get state. And that just gets the current state of the keyboard, what keys are pressed and what keys are not. And that is stored in the keyboard state object, so we can use that state. So now, if keyboard state, and when you press dot, you will see all these cool methods you can use, like is key down and is key up, or get press keys and all that type of stuff. But all we are worried about is if a key is down or not. And that's a method, so we open the parentheses, and it wants a key object. And that can be determined by keys dot, and we have all the keyboard buttons available that we can use. Now here you can choose what you want to move the object with. I'm going to use the arrow keys, so up, down, left, and right. So if keyboard state dot is key down, keys dot up, that means we press the up key, that key is down. We want to update the position dot y minus equals, and let's do 1.0f. So the position will be decreased by 1 every time we press the up key. Now we just copy this and paste it and replace keys.up to keys.down. And replace the